Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Read Tech webinar, How to Handle Missed Year-End Deadlines and OTC Monograph Exceptions. Your speakers today will be our Read Tech subject matter experts, Pharma Account Manager Julia Frasch, and our Senior Manager of Information Solutions in Life Sciences, Gary Sainer. For the next hour, they'll be guiding you through the prepared webinar material and answering any questions you may have at the end. Some quick logistics for today's webinar. This is a live recording, so all of the audience is being muted. However, as I noted, we will have a Q&A section at the end, so please utilize the chat box and ask any questions you have as they may come up, and time permitting, we'll address those. Time not permitting, we will follow up with you individually. If you're having any technical difficulties, please just reach out to us. And as always, the slides and video link will be distributed via email in the next few days. Okay. A quick overview of what we'll be covering today. We're going to look at the FDA drug annual deadlines. We'll take a specific deep dive into the year-end requirements, which include the establishment registration, drug listing, and blanket no changes certification. We're going to look at the OTC monograph reform and how that reform in the past year has changed some of those now missed year-end requirements. We're going to look at our Read Tech drug data storage and management options very quickly, and then have a question and answers section. For anything that we are not covering today, we really encourage you guys to take a look at the resources page on our website. If you follow the navigation that you can see on your screen, you can go to Resources, Knowledge Center, and Pharmaceuticals to find anything pharma related. And we also encourage you to follow us on social for the latest updates, including invitations to our upcoming webinars. With that, I will hand the reins over to Julia. And Julia and Gary, thank you so much for participating today, and can't wait to see the presentation.
Thank you so much, Erin, and hi, everybody. It's great to have you here today with us. The first thing that we're going to review is the FDA's annual drug deadline. So just going over some of the different requirements that we see throughout the year. Here is a list of those FDA drug regulatory activities that you see annually through the year, or, just first time. So if you have an NDA or a BLA, so the items that we're going to focus on are those annual reporting and what to do when you miss those, because we know that period was in Q4 of every year, and we have passed that time. So now what can we do to alleviate and make sure that you are compliant with the FDA's regulations, especially for those establishment registrations, as well as the drug label and listing. And with that, Gary, can you provide us maybe some more details on the timeline and what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I feel for those in the audience that have regulatory responsibilities, because as we look at this calendar of events, it is really packed full of activities and deadlines. We won't take the time to discuss every one of those particular events along that calendar. It is pretty full. We're going to focus in on the fourth quarter, as Julia had mentioned, and specifically talk about the establishment registration, that blanket no change certificate, and also the drug listing. Now, you'll see that drug listing -2 there, because in December, that is the second month that the FDA has defined in regulation to go out and make sure that your drug listing is current and up to date. The other event, going back here to June, mid-year, there's an activity where you also need to take a look at your drug labeling, make sure that everything is current and accurate. So the particular topics that we're going to touch on would be, in the event that you did not submit an establishment registration in the fourth quarter, or a blanket no change, or this drug listing, and you had 3 strikes against you, and maybe it's one or more that you missed, and we're going to talk about the ramifications of that and how you can get back into compliance. Now, before we go on to the next bit of information, I do want to clarify a couple things on this slide. This would be a typical slide, but there are some changes in this year 2024. So we're going to have to follow some footnotes. If you look down at the bottom, there's two asterisks that are next to the cosmetic facility registration and product listing. So this is a new requirement coming on board that you need to be aware of if you have any cosmetics in your portfolio. But this particular year, there is a deadline that is in effect that is out of sequence. Normally, the regulation states that the facility registration product listing would occur at the end of the year, December 29. But since this was first year and they're really just getting things rolling, the enforcement of that end of the year deadline is now in 2024, July 1st. So that puts that particular event right smack in the middle of the year. The other little clarification that we need to touch on just real quickly is on the left-hand side, the second item down, the drug amount report. And typically, this report is submitted by regulation. There was a draft regulation a couple years ago, finally finalized a few weeks ago, and that final regulation talked about and established a March 31st submission date for the previous year. So normally your data and distribution counts from last year, 2023, would be reported on May 31st of this year, only like a month away. The FDA has pushed that deadline back 4 months, so that date of that first submission of the 2023 data is now July 31st. So the middle of the year gets pretty busy, and with these two special events smack in the middle of the year, it's going to be a pretty busy June and July. But anyway, that is not our focus today. We're focusing in on some of these other events, the establishment registration and the drug listing. Aaron, I believe you have a poll prepared for us to get a feel for where the audience is at. So why don't we go ahead and run that at this point.
Sounds good, Gary. I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll now. And our question for you all is, has your company failed to comply with any of the required FDA year-end reporting? Please check all that apply. And of course, we want to remind you this is all anonymous. Your answers are not going to be shared publicly. But the choices that we do have up on your screen, you missed the drug establishment registration, the drug listing, the blanket no changes certification, you're not quite sure, or you've missed none, which is great. Just want to get an idea for kind of where our audience stands so that Gary and Julia can kind of tweak their talk track to best address your concerns. So we'll give it about another 10 seconds or so, and then we'll share the results of the poll. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. And I'm going to quickly share the results. It looks like about 20% of the audience missed the drug establishment, 20% the drug listing, about 30% the blanket no changes certification, 14% are unsure, and 36% have not missed any of our year-end regulations. Okay, so with that, I'll hand it back to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. And thank you all for those answers. It's very helpful to get some of that information. The first thing that we're going to look at, and this is the overarching, the drug end year requirements, and the first of which we'll review is that establishment registration, and kind of the differences of what you need to do if you are able to submit during Q4 and if you miss it in the interim. Perfect, thank you. So during Q1, if you are able to do one of these items during Q1 or Q3, if you have a new establishment registration, you want to do that as soon as possible. Any updates, any deregistrations or out of business notifications, those should be done as soon as you see them happen. during Q1 and Q3. The one thing to note here with establishment registrations that is a little bit different than what you see with a drug listing, which is what we'll go into more detail with later as well, is that these will only be effective for the current year. So if I update my establishment registration in Q1, I still have to do that yearly no change notification at the end of the year. Regardless of updates, these establishment registrations, the FDA still wants to see that notification saying, hey, we're still open, we're still functioning during Q4. So if I was still to update it in Q1, I would still need to do that new no change notification in Q4. Now, if there were any changes in Q4 or a deregistration or an out of business notification, then there wouldn't be a need to do the no change notification. But something has to happen with your establishment registration during Q4 that will then make it effective through the end of the next year. So during Q4 of 2024, if I am to do a no change notification, that will certify it until the end of 2025. So the next thing we'll look at is a few different, and if Gary, if you could go to the next slide, that would be awesome. Thank you. So the next thing we're going to look at is some of the different sites that you can utilize to see if your drug establishment is up to date and has a current registration. The first site and the best one to utilize is going to be that drug establishment registration search. And actually the URL for that has recently changed. So there is a new link. It is a new little bit of a website address to go to, but that will be the place to look to see where your establishment is certified until. You can also download that information from both of those links, and we'll be sure to distribute it these sides after the webinar. But that new drug establishment registration search is going to be where you want to go to see your current status and if you are up to date with that registration. And then I'll let Gary kind of show what that looks like when you do end up on that website and are searching for your establishment.
Yeah, so this is a little exercise of working with that report from the FDA's website. Deckers, as the nickname goes, with the Deckers website. Back in November, I took a screenshot of two different companies. The first one in the first row there, John Layer Joyce Incorporated. They showed that their registration would expire in 2024. So this was in November of 2023. So they already had submitted some information on their establishment registration that Julia was talking about sometime in October, and that caused the 2024 registration expiration date to be displayed there. Now, the second company, John Posen, was in a different scenario. As of November, that particular registration still showed the 2023 expiration date. So John Posen had not submitted any information about his establishment for that year or since October, and it's an alarm, not a fire alarm, because he really had 2 more months, November and December, to complete an update to his establishment registration. So I wanted to see how this played out. This morning, I went over to this website, actually with a new URL. The data is the same, just laid out a little bit differently. But I did a screenshot of what John Posen's establishment registration looks as of today. And good news, the establishment was sometime between November and now, was updated, and now this is in compliance. That the registration has a expiration date of 2024 all the way to December. So this is an example of how you can go check and find your particular information on your establishments, and you want to see, obviously, things have been updated. If you see an old date, then obviously or that may cause you to go ahead and schedule an update, but this gives you a little bit of evidence of where you actually stand from the FDA's point of view of what they have on record for your particular establishment. Now let's say that you don't find your establishment there, and now you have a compliant issue. So you had not been successful in sending an update or a no change by that December 31st deadline. A lot of things on your table to keep track of, but for whatever reason, it just was not submitted on time. One of the things that happens while you're recovering from the New Year's Eve party is that the FDA on January 1 marks your establishment as excluded, meaning that you missed that certification deadline. And that has some impact. So one of the things that happens is that particular establishment is removed from the public data. If you were to submit a drug listing and reference that establishment, you'd get a validation error. So that is significant. And technically now you're outside the regulations, and your drug label would be misbranded. So you want to remediate that and fix that as soon as possible. And it's pretty straightforward. Just go ahead and submit an establishment registration. Now you do have a couple options, but one of them is not available. The no change notification is not available. That needs to be submitted in the fourth quarter. And now you're sitting in January or February, and that particular vehicle is not available for you to submit that update. You can submit a regular establishment registration that you had submitted in the past. Basically keep all the same contents. Technically there's a little bit of change to the SPL. There's some header information, some IDs and version numbers that get updated, but you simply roll that out just like you had submitted in the past. Your other option is to roll in some additional changes. Maybe there was a new establishment that just happened to start up and be coincident with this particular submission, or maybe there was a contact that changed, phone number, who knows, zip code, although it's very rare. But you can roll in changes and then make that submission. Your other options is to deregister. Maybe you had an establishment that closed down, so now you used to have 6 sites, but you only have 5 now. You can remove one. And heaven forbid, I hope this doesn't happen, but your company may have gone out of business. You do have responsibility to let the FDA know about that and submit an out of business submission. So once you do one of those 4 options, you're good for 2024. So that particular activity is good for the balance of the year. And then obviously the end of the year, you need to start all over and start that cycle back over again. So that's a really quick overview of how you identify and how you remediate some of the missed submissions for drug establishments. And Julia, I think we want to move over to some drug listing at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So much like the drug establishment registrations, there are, annual requirements for the drug listings as well. They are slightly different than the drug establishment registration, as I mentioned previously, but we'll go into a little more detail now about what that looks like, in Q1 to Q3 and then Q4, what that would look like as well. So the difference between the blanket no change and that establishment registration is that regardless of changes, you do have to do the establishment no change notification. However, with drug listings, if I was to update my product between Q1 and Q4, that would take the need away for doing the blanket no change, and that would certify that NDC code until the end of the following calendar year. So if I was to update one of my product drug listings today, that would certify it until the end of 2025. So the same is to be said for new drug listings. With anything with approval, you'll see that date being given to you from the FDA. That is 14 days after approval. The FDA will also expect you to have a drug listing if you were to register an establishment prior to any distribution of that product. So any new drug listings, if I was to do a new drug listing today, that would certify it until the end of the following year. As I mentioned previously, any updates, so again, if I was to update one in January, that again would certify the drug listing until the end of the year. And then, of course, to delist, that is going to deactivate it and obviously remove the need to do that blanket no change at the end of the year. Now, if you haven't had any new drug listings, any changes, everything has remained the same. However, your product is still out there and being sold and circulated to the world, in the United States, wherever that may be, you will have to do that blanket no change recertification at the end of the year, which basically tells the FDA, hey, we're still making all of these products, they're still in distribution, but everything is remaining the same. So then they will remain active through the end of the next year, and basically it is the FDA just wants to see those NDC codes and see the ones that are still active. So between October and December, you have the opportunity to do that blanket no change recertification for the products that have not seen any changes or are not new. And much like the drug establishment registrations, there are many places to look for your NDC codes. The first and probably the most important would be that National Drug Code Directory. When you get into that site, you'll be able to have a very clear and comprehensive idea of which items are certified until the end of the next year or the ones that do need to be recertified. There's some additional sites, the unfinished drugs as well as the compounded drugs, they can all be found within the NDC directory. So once you get to NDC directory, you're able to kind of download that idea of when your products need to be recertified. It will look really similar to that screenshot that Gary showed for the drug establishment registration. So again, these will be the best place to look if you are ever quitting, in October and you're thinking, hey, I wonder what I need to be certified. A great first that National Drug Code Directory.
Okay, well, I wanted to take a little bit deeper analysis, Julia, of some of the counts of where we're at today. So I did go to that NDC database file and also the database excluded drugs. We'll just focus on those two particular topics. And when you download those, you can get some counts and some analysis, but they are able to be analyzed by the product category. So they have human OTCs, human prescriptions, and kind of a broader group other. The particular products that are already certified and in the NDC directory, they total about 91,000. So this is a very good count, very high count. So they're certified for 2024. That means the drug listing took place sometime last year, or there was some activity last year, or the blanket no change was submitted in fourth quarter. So that is a high success rate. Now, the 11,000 that had that certified through 2025, those particular products have had some activity already this year. So between January and as we are pretty well through February now, there's been some activity on those particular drugs. So they are now certified through 2025, so about 11,000. So putting those two together, we're over 100,000 drug products that are active and in good position. Now, the other side of the coin is that there's a significant amount of drug products that are not active and are in this black hole. As one of my associates used to call this the naughty list. So this is a list that you don't want to be on and try to avoid. And I divided out by those products that were in this expired, inactive, and excluded category for those that are certified, that were last certified up to 2022. So there's a huge amount, 61,000 drug products in that particular category. And I believe this is pretty old information or pretty old products going back prior to 2022. They might never be renewed and brought up to compliance. For whatever reason, they're off the market. And that's not to say they can't come back on, but I don't think too many of those would. More importantly is the number in the bottom right here, a little bit over 7,500 products were last certified in 2023, 2024, or even 2025, a few of them. But now they have this status of being, most of these, about 7,000 of them, are inactive. And that is most likely because they missed the deadline of last year, and they went to expired on January 1st, and then about the end of January, we understand that the FDA moves them into inactive. And so that's a significant amount. This should be a little bit of alarm for those in the audience. If you happen to be in this category, you want to focus in on these particular products, and ideally this should drop to zero, right? So you don't want to be on this naughty list of not being compliant. Now, the FDA does send out a letter to alert you about the fact that it might be made inactive. And Julia, do you want to just talk a little bit about that letter? I think we have an extract with some of the main points highlighted here.
Yeah, absolutely. This email was sent out, I believe, on January 8th. So if you did have non-compliant drug listings or establishment registrations, you would receive a notification much like this one in January. If you didn't, but you know that you have some, uncompliant drug listings, it might be a good idea to look who you have listed with the FDA as your, person of contact. So this email is sent out, and basically it explains that your drug listings are at jeopardy of being inactivated, and then that inactivization typically happens on or around the end of January 30th. So, now it is, into February, so those products would be, marked on Daily Med. You'll see that red notification at the top, and then removed as well from that NDC directory. So you would receive a notification from the FDA basically saying that your drug products are at risk for being inactivated because either there were no updates or the blanket no change recertification was not completed. So it'll look something like this.
Yep. So if this looks kind of familiar, then let's talk a little bit more about how you can remediate this. So these are the issues at hand. One, that you missed the certification and didn't have updates during the course of the year last year. We just talked about the expired and the inactive status, and there is some impacts of that. So now technically you're in violation and misbranded. The product is marked expired and inactive in the NDC directory. And there is one other significant event. The product is then removed from the NDC SPL data elements file. So this NSDE file. This is a file that the FDA shares with CMS, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and they use that list to identify drug products that they provide reimbursement for. So if your product comes off that list, that has significant financial issues where now patients don't receive any reimbursement, and it gets to be quite a struggle for those people that might actually need the product and don't have funds and so on. So anyway, there is a financial impact when your product comes off that NSDE. The bottom line here is that we want to correct that. We want to help you correct that, get that product back into compliance, and then restore all the normal distribution. So you do have a couple options to do this remediation. As Julie had mentioned, the blanket no change certification is not available, just like it wasn't available for the establishment registration. This blanket no change is not available for the drug listing. Now, you can submit the very same drug listing. This is the individual SPL file, so you can't bulk these together. And it might be the same, again, some technical difference on the header of the SPL. Or you can roll in some changes, or you can elect to delist the product. But once you submit one of those three, you're back in compliance, and you can celebrate, and now you're good for this current year. All right, so let's move over to blanket no change certificate. We talked a little bit about this, but Julie, I think you might have, I don't know, a little bit more about that, and then we want to talk about a ramification of this particular submission.
Yeah, absolutely. As I kind of said before, and as Gary said, the blanket no change recertification, it's something you can do within Q4. So starting October 1st to December 31st is the period for the blanket no change recertification. And during this timeline, you're able to submit a report that basically says these products that, we haven't changed this calendar year are still in circulation. The one thing to note here is that the blanket no change, again, cannot be completed outside of Q4. So if it's January 1st, you are no longer able to do that blanket no change recertification. Each product would individually have to go in and submit separate SPL listings. Like Gary mentioned, just adjusting a few different things within the data elements from like version number, not editing much about that SPL, but again, a separate SPL file would have to be submitted for each product outside of Q4.
Yeah, I think that's a significant difference, Julie. It's an enticement to submit that blanket no change early so that you can do this in a bulk file, single file, just list the NDCs. Now if you miss that deadline, you're in a position of, submitting, if you have, 7,500 different products, you have to submit 7,500 different actual SPL files. So,
right.
Yeah, but that's the way the FDA had set it up, so that's unfortunately the
much
extra
easier
work
to not miss the deadline. Definitely easier to meet the deadline and not have to submit separate files, because you can submit one, or like you said, if you have 100 products, then you're going to have to submit 100 times, which is definitely a lot more than just submitting that blanket no change once.
Julia, you talk to many different clients and kind of advise them best way to get back into compliance. Once they receive the letter and they miss the deadline, do many of the clients elect to make some changes, or are they just mostly concerned and trying to do the bare minimum, keep it simple, and submit like an old SPL that they already have in place and really just want to take care of it quickly?
Yeah, right now we're kind of seeing things across the board. So if you miss it and you don't have any changes, we can just go in and send them off and basically utilize that older version and make it a newer version. However, right now with OTC companies, we are also seeing the OTC Monograph update, which is an update that has to be done as well with those new OTC Monograph numbers. So if you were already non-compliant, it's a good opportunity to kind of get two things done at once. Updating that OTC Monograph, the marketing category, as well as the Monograph number, and in doing so, that will recertify your product until the end of the following year. So if I was to go in and update one of my products with that new OTC information, it would be certified until the end of next year. So with doing that, you're able to kind of get multiple things done in one shot and in one submission. So you can utilize it if you did miss it, which we never recommend. But if you did and you're an OTC company that has not made these updates, it's a great opportunity to make those updates while recertifying that product.
All right, super. That's actually a good transition over to the final topic that we want to talk about here as far as regulations go. Just to recap, when we were referring to this OTC monograph regulation, October 1st is this deadline to start using the new marketing category. So the OTC monograph drug is that particular category that must be used. And along with that, many times you're using CFRs, the Code of Federal Regulation part numbers, in the application number field. Well, that now is obsolete and to be replaced by a monograph number. So, we've made some changes to the data collection form to accommodate that, so you can pick these items and so on. And then that clarification came about where the FDA said for this year, meaning the end of 2023, the blanket no change certification can still list the old SPL OTC listings. We had a webinar on that, and there might be some more information coming about, but let's just recap that on a calendar. So on the 2023 fourth quarter, we had these, 3 months, October, November, December laid out. And if you submitted an individual SPL monograph, it would have to comply with the regulations. So some companies were very proactive and aggressive and said, okay, let's go ahead and do it. And they made the changes to that individual SPL for each of their OTC monographs and submitted the new SPL in that fourth quarter. Your other option, option B, was to make use of the blanket no change certificate submission and just list that NDC number just like you had in the past, and it would point to that NDC that was found in the old legacy OTC listing, and it would have the old codes in it. And the FDA will accepted that in 2023 fourth quarter. But the phrase you can pay me now or pay me later. You could either make the submission in the fourth quarter last year or sometime this year. So sooner or later, you're going to have to make that update to your over-the-counter monograph submission and include those new codes. So Julia brought up a real good point I hadn't thought about. If that happens to be one of the drug products that was delinquent and missed the deadline, you can roll that particular change in and take care of both of those particular requirements at the same time. All right, so moving on. Let's get a poll question here. Erin, I think you have something queued up for us to submit some information on.
Yes, thanks, Gary. So now that we are all up to date on the OTC monograph changes, we're wondering, do you need to update any listings based on the new OTC monograph regulations? So this is an easy one, yes, no, or I'm not sure. So being as though this is a pretty straightforward one, we'll only leave it open for another 5 or 10 seconds or so. So we would appreciate it if you would all take the time to get your answers in. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like about 40% are going to need to update their listings, 33% are thinking no, and 27% are not sure. All right. So thank you, Gary and Julia. I'll hand this back to you.
All right, very good. So we're going to change gears a little bit. We covered the regulations, ramifications, and how to go about remediating those particular issues. I'd like to talk a little bit about the high-level concept of how you actually go about making those submissions. So the challenge is taking data and information that you have on the left-hand side that is inside your firewall, the labeler, and making sure that it travels securely and accurately over to the FDA. So there's a couple of different ways, actually 4 that I'm going to highlight that are in the middle there that you can select between using a service. So this would be like an outsourced service that you could provide your data to, and then this resource processes that, builds SPL, and we actually offer that particular mechanism to take data, build the SPL, and do the submission through the electronic submission gateway. A second option on the screen there is engage a vendor. They might have an internal tool or even a software as a service model. We actually offer that as well. So you can make use of that particular platform, and data comes into that. Now you're talking much more automated processing of that data, some automatic validation, some submission activities, and so on. But as a result, the output of both of those would be building an SPL and having that submitted through the electronic submission gateway. And actually the third option would make use of the SPL and the gateway as well, but now we're talking about the FDA X forms. This is a website platform that the FDA offers. You can manual entry into those particular website web forms, and it creates an SPL, and you're able to submit that as well. The last one is a slightly different, again offered by the FDA, CEDAR Direct. This platform allows you to make entry, build an SPL in the background, and it's submitted directly into the FDA. This connection, as I understand it, does not make use of the electronic submission gateway, but it does in fact build an SPL. All of that information, whatever method you use, eventually the FDA has that and is validated various levels, and information is made public. So the particular databases that we were referring to earlier, this Deckers, which is that database for the establishments, is available to the public, as well as the NDC directory. We didn't talk too much today, but there is certainly a webinar or website that you're familiar with, the National Library of Medicine Daily Med, where the actual labeling content is published and made available to the public. So there's some challenges when a company looks at this in a holistic point of view. There's a whole portfolio to review. It could be quite diverse, and it could be quite large, but keeping track of what establishment registrations are due, which ones are done, what needs some correction. Same thing with drug labeling. Usually much more complex, because now you have some narrative that you typically need to keep track of, and there's versions and change being affected that might be in play, and then you have a warning that goes over top of that or something, and there's a little bit more complex data handling when you talk about drug labeling in the actual listing. So there's challenge there in having a platform, an action plan, and executing it, and making sure that the submission was in fact successful, verifying it, and getting positive confirmation that the data that you submitted was in fact received. I had mentioned that of those models, there's a couple drug label data management tools. And Julie, I'm going to ask you just to do a quick recap of the solution that ReTech has, and those in the audience might be using it, or they might be looking for a particular system or solution, or they might be entertaining a possible change. But why don't you do a quick recap for those in the audience that have so interest?
Yeah, absolutely. So, here at ReTech, we do have a few different offerings on how we approach assisting you with compliance, and that can look a lot of different ways for different clients. So whatever you need, we're here to cater to that and really find a solution that works for you. However, this is kind of our a general chart of what our solution looks like, inside of our data management tool as well as outside. It's a matter of your organization providing us information for the drug listing or the establishment registration or the blanket no change at the end of the year, whatever that may be, whatever listing or requirement that it is. You're going to provide us information, and then we take that information and kind of do the heavy lifting of validating, making sure that everything is in the correct place, doing a few rounds of QC and quality check, making sure that output is, the SPL is correct every time, and that we're saving you time and effort in order to achieve that compliance. Additionally, we have a new suite of services that include the ECTD, or the Electronic Common Technical Document, and regulatory services. So we are really here to help you with end-to-end, because once we are able to generate that SPL for you, we also can submit it on your behalf to the FDA. And again, really helping to provide that end-to-end compliance services The other solution that we have is our single source for drug products tool. And I think there's some more details on that on the next slide we have here. And basically what single source does is a lot of the work that we do traditionally as well. However, it creates a single source for all of your drug files and establishment registrations, all of that information to live. And then outside of that, it also helps with SPL creation. So it's going to simplify the management of your data because it's going to let a place live where everything is housed, all of the versions. There's going to be version control and an audit trail so that if somebody, say, leaves your organization, there's comprehensive information of start to finish with a drug product. And that kind of falls into that streamlining your workflow and reducing the time it takes to create SPL. Single source has capability to create SPL on demand. And then a new feature is that you're actually able to submit it on demand as well. So you really are able to take the SPL creation process into your own hands, but also have more security when it comes to validation and errors and making sure that everything is compliant and correct that first time around. So, it saves you time and again, allows you to do things like validation and version control much easier than, say, storing all of the files just in a folder on your computer. So it really does provide a lot of different benefits, and if you're ever interested in hearing more, I'm definitely here to provide that information whenever needed. But that is a high-level overview of kind of what single source looks like and its functionality.
Thank you very much, Julie. There's a quick little update on the cosmetic regulation there.
Yeah. So we're seeing a lot of progress in terms of the cosmetic registrations. Initially, the due date had been, and it still technically is, December 29th of 2023. However, this will not be enforced until July 1st of 2024. And what the cosmetic registration is requiring is a facility registration and renewal of that every 2 years, as well as a product listing and updates to those once a year, much like that kind of that blanket no change that you're seeing. We are able to also assist with these requirements. And again, we're just providing updates to our clients as soon as we hear them, but we have had success with validation. So again, please feel free to contact us. And we did have a webinar on cosmetic registrations not too long ago, I believe at the end of last year. So that is also an additional reference. But we will be sure to keep everyone updated as we hear more. And if you're interested in hearing more about our services and how we can help register your cosmetic products, please feel free to reach out to us. And then I think that additionally falls under our other, our newest service offering, which is our professional services. And like I mentioned before, we're really hoping to provide our clients with an end-to-end solution. So, we offer premium services for our single source for drug products tool. So if you wanted to, have a common place, but also be hands-off from your drug listings, that's something we can offer. Electronic common technical document services, so anything ECTD, say you have an NDA or a BLA or are preparing for one of those, we can help with those submissions. Anything from regulatory consulting services to U.S. agent services, as well as Health Canada services. And outside of that, if there is ever something that you may need in the regulatory space, we are always happy to evaluate and see if that is an option that we can assist with. So always feel free to reach out and we can definitely speak more and learn more about how we can assist and make sure that compliance is as easy as possible for your organization and you are as hands-off or hands-on as you want to be. So these are our new professional services that we are extremely excited about. So if you do want to learn any more, please reach out and we'll be happy to provide that information. And I think that leads us into our last poll question.
Yep, thank you so much, Julia. And I'm going to launch our final poll question here. If everyone in the audience could just take a moment and check all that apply. We're wondering if you need help understanding any of the recent or upcoming mandates that Julia just discussed or, we touched on throughout the presentation. So specifically, we're looking at MOCRA, the cosmetic regulation, the OTC monograph updates, Health Canada XML requirements, or just other general areas that you might need help in, SPL, ECTD, or other pharma services. Definitely this information helps because we can tailor our upcoming webinars to the topics that are going to be most useful to you guys. But also, if you're looking for specific information about anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at pharma@readtech.com as well, and we can certainly set up a conversation and answer any questions that you all might have. That being said, let's give it just a few more seconds with the poll. Looks like some folks are still answering, and then we'll wrap this one up and move on to the Q&A. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And it does look like there's a lot of interest in MOCRA and Health Canada, which is not surprising given as those deadlines are right on the horizon. But also nice to see that you guys are interested in OTC monographs and more general information as well. Hopefully we can get a really good calendar of events running in 2024 for this audience. We really appreciate your feedback. Okay. So that being said, I do think we have a few minutes to move on to a couple questions that came through. It looks like we have about 5 minutes left. We don't want to take up too much of anybody's time. But Gary and Julia, maybe we could address just a few questions. Firstly, the first question that came in today, what kind of updates constitute not submitting a blanket no changes certification?
I'm sorry, Erin, could you repeat that again? What changes do not?
Sure. What kind of updates constitute not submitting a blanket no changes certification? So what I took from this, and Gary, perhaps you take something else, is basically what kind of updates are required by the FDA that you wouldn't be able to loop under that blanket no changes certification?
Oh, so yeah, there are a couple levels of changes that sometimes you can roll up a change that would be maybe some grammar changes, nothing technically different. It would not affect the safety or the effectiveness of the drug product. And I know that some of those particular changes are rolled up into it like an annual submission. They wait until they get their annual submission ready, and then they just kind of include all those at once. So if you learn of a grammar change in February, you might not have an update for that particular product. I mean, you do have to check it in June by regulation, but again, if this is so minor, many times you might see this being pushed off to December timeframe or something like that, and you might have an annual update, and then that change would be included. Now, there's a fine line there, but as soon as you cross over to something that is going to affect safety, the effectiveness, patient's experience, dosage, identification of the product that could be misconstrued, or those type of issues, then the recommendation is do that as soon as possible, and that would be the labeling change for that year. You would not need to include that particular drug product with your blanket no change at the end of the year. So hopefully that kind of gives a little bit of guidance about whether or not you want to include those changes when you include them, those significant ones. If you have any questions about whether or not it ought to be, you always can go to the FDA help desk and get some information, back from them about whether or not this particular change is significant enough that you ought to act on it right away. Now, there's some real obvious things, like maybe if this is a change to the black box warning or something that is really, really significant. In some cases, the FDA actually will contact you about making a change, and it might be to a class of products, and your particular product is in that class. it has happened where the FDA will definitely come to you and say, hey, we need to go with this particular wording across the board. So you might be approached by the FDA to make a change, but other than that, you do have to make a judgment call. Hopefully that answers the question, Erin.
Yeah, I think so, Gary. And if it doesn't, definitely feel free, audience, to reach out to us, pharma@readtech.com, to provide some more clarity. Another question that we got a few times, actually, guys, is if the company submitted a blanket no change certification for 2023 and plans to update their monograph category and monograph ID later this year, what does that mean for their 2024 blanket no change?
Well, what would happen then, you did make a drug listing change in 2024, early in the year, let's say, I don't know, February, March timeframe. So at the end of the year of 2024, you would not have to include that NDC number. But I do understand that it's okay actually to include it. So it's not like it's going to be rejected because you made a submission in February and then also that NDC number appeared on the blanket no change at the end of the year. So that is, a viable option for you, but it does not have to be included, for that year. Obviously, the year after, going out to 2026 now, it's a brand new table, and you have to make a determination of whether or not you made any submissions or are you going to make use of the blanket no change. Julie, is there some additional things that you want to add to that from your experience?
No, that was perfect. I mean, if you do any of those updates this year, then those NDC codes wouldn't have to be on the blanket no change at the end of the year. So, it's kind of effective. So if you have all of your drug listings being updated, that would take away the need for a blanket no change at the end of the year. Rule of thumb, I just always recommend checking the NDC directory if you're ever unsure if, say you do all those updates and then you're, not sure if everything got recertified. I would just head to the NDC directory and look at all of those certified through dates. But yeah, if those NDC codes are being updated this calendar year, then you do not need to do that blanket no change at the end of the year.
Great. Thank you so much, Julia and Gary. I do know we're at the hour, but I'm going to squeeze one more question in because I know the answer is pretty succinct, and I think it's actually probably a question that a lot of people could use some clarification on. This one is actually about MOCRA. The question is, why are there two deadlines? Being December 29th, 2023, and then July 1, 2024. So Gary, if you could possibly just quickly explain sort of the difference there.
Yeah, in the regulation, the 29th of December is actually the official deadline, but the FDA came out and I think they realized that there was some industry time to react to this and get the data together, and it was a brand new activity for the cosmetic industry. So anyway, they elected to have something called enforcement discretion. So that's their fancy way of saying we're not going to slap your hand if you don't meet the December 29th deadline. We'll let you go until July. So that's the crux of it. The FDA does in fact recommend that you submit early as possible and shoot for a time that you can accommodate. So getting it in early makes a lot of sense, but the enforcement for this particular year, and it's a one-time year only, or this time year only, the actual enforcement of that deadline would be in July. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yep, great. Well, Gary and Julia, thank you so much for answering these questions and for all the information that you presented today. Gary, if you could just bump us forward one slide, please.
Sure.
I just want to thank the audience for taking time to attend our presentation today and for all your engagement with the polls and the questions. If you do need any more information, please feel free to reach out to us. If you have questions about this topic or any other, we're happy to help. We're always here. Additionally, you can be on the lookout in your inbox for the slides and recording sometime later this week. So we thank you all for attending this afternoon and look forward to next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye now.